Alien beastwoman medic licks my injuries and says it's protocol. Welcome to the world of science fiction. Comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Jack's body hit the ground hard, the jungle floor breaking his fall with the sharp crunch of branches and the wet squish of moss. His vision blurred, static buzzing in one ear, his comms fried after the crash. Smoke trailed from what was left of his ship somewhere behind him. Likely already picked apart by the moon scavengers. Every muscle screamed, his leg burned, and his side felt cracked from the impact. He reached for his pistol, but his arm barely moved. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a low growl echoed. Not the engine. Not a creature he recognized. Then footsteps heavy, steady, purposeful. Before he could react, the shadow loomed. He blinked up at her, trying to focus. The face was not human. Angular features, a sleek snout, and lavender fur glowing faintly in the dim light. Tribal jewelry clinked against her muscular chest, silver and bone etched with alien sigils. Glowing blue claws flicked with precision as she crouched beside him. Her tongue, impossibly long and slick, slid briefly along one fang before she spoke. "You're still alive," she said, her voice deep but calm, with an accent that wrapped around each syllable like silk through gravel. Good. Easier that way. Jack tried to move, but she pressed a large clawed hand to his chest and shook her head. "You'll tear the muscles more if you struggle." She leaned in close, sniffing once at his collar, then at the blood drying around his hip. "Human," she muttered. "Wasn't expecting that." Her fingers moved swiftly, tearing away his ruined flight suit. Jack grunted in pain, but kept his teeth clenched. She examined the gash across his thigh, then, without a word, leaned down and licked it. "What the hell?" he managed through gritted teeth. "Protocol," she answered without looking up. "My saliva has antibacterial properties, helps the flesh seal, speeds recovery." She kept going, tongue tracing the length of the wound with slow, practiced strokes. It wasn't just functional. Her eyes flicked up to meet his once, just once, and lingered for a heartbeat too long. The pain dulled, the stinging numbed, and Jack, against every logical fiber of his body, began to relax. There was something primal and deeply strange about the sensation, warm, wet, and steady. Yet the relief it brought was undeniable. When she finished, she stood and lifted him with startling ease. Her arms were strong but careful, her touch clinical yet not cold. She carried him deeper into the jungle, ignoring his muttering protests and limp gestures of resistance. They passed bioluminescent plants that pulsed in soft green rhythm, the scent of damp herbs thick in the air. The jungle buzzed and hissed around them, but she moved with confidence, undeterred. She ducked under a low canopy and stepped into a medical tent, unlike any field station Jack had seen. Blue biolantrons hung from coiled vines, giving the space a cool underwater glow. Steam curled from humidifiers lined with crushed bark and glowing minerals. Shelves were stocked with jars, some filled with leaves, others with fluids Jack didn't want to guess at. It smelled of antiseptic earth, pungent oils, and something musky beneath it all. She laid him onto a mat cushioned with thick furs and took a step back. "You'll stay here until your injuries close," she said firmly. "You move, I restrain. You talk too much, I silence. Do not test me." Jack stared at her, not sure if he should laugh or be worried. "You always treat your patients like this." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she busied herself grinding something in a mortar, adding it to a steaming bowl which she placed near his face. The fumes stung, then cleared his sinuses with a rush of clarity. She finally replied without turning around. "Most of my patients don't live long enough to talk back. You're different because I'm human." "Because you're arrogant," she said plainly, then turned and crouched again beside him, "but not stupid. You didn't panic? You didn't fight me. That earns you some respect." He studied her features more closely now. Her eyes glowed faintly. Not blue like her claws, but golden near the pupil. There were scars along her shoulders and neck, not fresh but old ones, deliberate, as though earned. Her fur rippled slightly with each movement, hiding an array of lean, powerful muscles beneath. She wore no armor, only the jewelry, and a short wrap marked with tribal glyphs. Everything about her spoke of control, not gentleness, not cruelty, just control. "You got a name?" he asked. "Silvia." Doesn't sound very alien. She looked at him like she was weighing whether to explain or just sedate him. "It's an interpretation, easier for your species tongue. The true name is not something you could pronounce without tearing your throat." "Well, thanks for sparing me the hospital bill," Jack said, trying to shift and immediately regretting it. She pressed a cool poultice onto his ribs and he hissed, "Hold still, or I start again." Silvia worked silently, tending to every scrape and bruise with a blend of tongues and salves. Her focus never wavered, but the lines around her eyes softened slightly when she wasn't speaking. Jack could tell she was watching him, studying. Not like a scientist, more like a hunter unsure of the prey's intentions. "You said protocol earlier," Jack muttered after a while. "That's some kind of tribal oath." "Yes, all healers follow the old codes. No sentient left to suffer. Pain is not to be ignored. Wounds must be treated, even if they are the enemy." "Am I the enemy?" Silvia looked up from his chest wound and met his gaze. "Not yet." Jack swallowed hard. There was no threat in her voice, but something about the way she said it made him shiver. Later, when she finished applying the last bandage, she sat beside him, not leaving, just watching. The steam from the herbs curled around her, making her first shimmer in the biolight. Jack felt his heart beat slow. The pain was nearly gone. His body was healing faster than it should have. Whatever she was doing worked. "I should be dead," he said quietly. "You would be," she replied, "if I didn't find you first." "Why did you help me?" Silvia didn't answer for a long moment. Then, softly, she said, "Because I saw you fall, and something in me told me not to look away." Jack closed his eyes, not out of exhaustion, but to process the strange warmth spreading through his chest. It wasn't just the herbs or the treatment. It was her presence, her voice, the low rumble of her breathing. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or whether she'd let him leave when the time came. But for now, in this glowing alien tent with a beast woman who spoke of protocols and stared at him too long, he was safe, and maybe, for the first time in a long time, not alone. The second morning came slow and quiet, the dimmed blue lanterns casting soft shadows across the curved walls of the tent. Jack stirred, aching but conscious, his body already feeling stronger than it should. His leg didn't scream anymore. His ribs didn't bite when he breathed. The soreness was dull now, like fatting thunder instead of a lightning strike. He sat up slowly, his fingers brushing over the bandages that Silvia had carefully wrapped the night before. They held firm. Beneath them, he could feel the warmth of healing skin, sealed faster than any human med gel could have managed. Jack didn't like being impressed this easily, but facts were facts. She knew what she was doing. He scanned the tent. Silvia wasn't inside. The strange herbal aroma still hung in the air, more pungent now after hours of steeping and the humidity. A wooden dish rested beside his sleeping mat, filled with a thick brown paste and something that looked like smoked root. He didn't touch it at first. He waited, listened. Nothing. After another few moments, his stomach made the decision for him. He leaned forward with a wince and grabbed the dish. The paste was gritty, earthy, and oddly sweet. The root was bitter, but it quieted the hunger pangs, clawing at his gut. He had just finished when Silvia reappeared, brushing aside the hide flap that served as a door. Her arms were slick with water, droplets gliding down her fur and catching the light like tiny stars. She didn't speak right away, just looked at him, nodded once, and moved to place a bowl on a side table with steady hands. "You're healing," she said finally, voice low and satisfied, faster than I expected." "Guess your spit works," Jack muttered, setting the empty bowl down beside him. "Tastes better than this root, though." Her mouth twitched slightly, almost a smile. She didn't sit, not yet. She watched him the way one might observe a half-trained beast, alert, calculating, not fearful, just cautious. Jack wasn't offended, he understood. He'd earned plenty of that look before, and from people far less justified than Silvia. He adjusted his legs, testing the motion. "So, now what? You gonna send me back out into the jungle, or is protocol still in effect?" She moved closer, finally crouching across from him. "You can't leave yet. Not fully repaired. Ligament tear in your thigh still needs days. Internal bruising is deeper than it appears. If you run, you'll tear open everything." Jack gave her a dry look. "You plan to tie me down?" "Only if you give me a reason," she replied without blinking. He snorted, shaking his head. "You always this charming to your patients." "No, only to the ones I'm not supposed to like." That pulled him up short. Her voice hadn't changed, still calm, still steady, but there was something underneath it, a truth she didn't care to disguise. Jack leaned back against the furs and regarded her with fresh curiosity. "So you don't like me, but you won't let me go either." "I didn't say I don't like you," Silvia corrected. "I said I'm not supposed to." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Because I'm human." "No," she said slowly. "Because you're mercenary. Because your kind brings war to places that are not yours. You work for Tarotek. You sell your weapons to the highest bidder." "I didn't sell anything," he snapped, sitting upright despite the tug in his side. "I was hired for recon, extraction. No shots fired, no bodies dropped. I never signed up to bomb anyone's holy ground." She stared at him in silence for several long breaths. "They told us different." "I'm sure they did." Jack rubbed a hand over his face. "Let me guess. Tarotek is drilling somewhere they shouldn't be, and your people are the inconvenient truth they're trying to bury." "Not just drilling," she said. "They're taking, bottling, profiting from the sacred springs. The healing waters are not meant for machines. They're alive, and they're dying." That stopped him. He hadn't been briefed on anything that dramatic. No mention of sacred springs, no details beyond GPS coordinates and a pickup window. Now it all started to click. The tension, the drones, the sudden ambush during what was supposed to be a silent extraction. He'd been fed half-truths, probably less. "Used. I didn't know," Jack said finally, voice low. "I wouldn't have agreed to this job if I did." Silvia's eyes narrowed, not in disbelief, but in examination. He could tell she was measuring the weight of his words against his body language, the pulse in his throat, the tilt of his gaze. Her people were trained to read truth in signs more subtle than tone. "Then prove it," she said simply. He frowned. "Howl." "Don't leave," she said. "Stay, see what we protect, learn what they destroy." Jack hesitated. "That sounds a lot like picking sides." "It is," Silvia said, rising to her full height. "But so is pretending you don't already know which side you're on." She walked toward the tent's entrance, pausing only to glance back once. "Your leg won't carry you far, Jack. Not yet. You have time to think." When she left, the silence didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt heavy, laced with expectation. Jack stared at the ceiling, the scent of steam and salve thick in his nose, and felt the pressure of choice closing in. He had no orders, no backup, no functional gear, but he had 2 working eyes and ears. And now, the truth. Or at least the start of it. Silvia wasn't just another medic. She was more than muscle and claws in a strange silver tongue. There was loyalty behind her every movement and passion she hadn't even begun to admit out loud. Jack didn't know what he meant to her yet. A guest, a risk, something else. But when she licked his wounds again that night, slow, deliberate, her eyes never leaving his, he realized something deeper was forming between them. Not just protocol, connection trust, and under it all the slow spark of something neither of them dared name yet. But it was there, waiting, growing stronger with each breath. The jungle was never silent. Even at night, it hummed with a layered rhythm of alien life, distant chirps, fluttering wings, the soft throb of unseen things breathing in sync beneath the canopy. Jack lay awake on the floormat, his leg braced, ribs still tender, but his mind sharper than it had been in days. He kept replaying Silvia's words, trying to separate the truth from the loyalty. She was clearly a believer, one of those people who didn't just follow orders, but lived for something deeper. That made her dangerous, but also compelling. She hadn't left his side completely that day. Even when she stepped out of the tent, Jack could sense her watching from a distance. The same way soldiers monitored prisoners they weren't sure they could trust yet. But she wasn't cruel, not even guarded in the cold sense. There was something else beneath her reserve. Curiosity, maybe even hope. That was what confused him most. She should have turned him in, bound him, or at least interrogated him. Instead, she healed him, fed him, and asked him to stay. Jack didn't sleep much, too much noise in his head. So, when the ground trembled just slightly, he was already awake. At first, he thought it was just one of the deeper jungle creatures moving through the underbrush, until the tremor came again, heavier, faster than accompanied by a low mechanical whine. Jack's breath caught. That sound didn't belong here. It wasn't organic. It wasn't natural. It was a drone engine, a Tarotek reconnaissance model if he remembered correctly. The weight of it matched the lightest infantry scout bot, one designed to sweep terrain and relay enemy positions. He sat up and reached for the salvaged blade Silvia had left nearby, carved from some heavy bone and sharpened to a vicious edge. She said it was ceremonial, but it would have to do. The tent flap ripped open just as he stood. Silvia stormed in, claws glowing faintly, eyes hard and glowing with adrenaline. "Get down," she snapped, already ducking beside him as a sudden burst of energy fire ripped through the edge of the tent. The bolt melted part of the lantern stand, sending it crashing in a shower of sparks. Jack didn't hesitate. He followed her down and crawled toward the rear of the tent, where a panel had been discreetly left unsealed, a makeshift escape route. Before he could reach it, another whine sliced through the air, followed by the unmistakable hiss of hydraulic legs. 2 of them, Silvia growled. "Maybe 3. "Tarotek?" Jack asked, already knowing the answer. She didn't look at him. "Scouts first. They want to know if I'm sheltering anything worth bombing. They'll find out if they get inside. Then we don't let them." Silvia lunged without another word, bursting through the front flap with a snarl that tore through the night like a sonic boom. Jack scrambled to his feet, weapon in hand, and followed close behind. The clearing outside the tent was bathed in dim purple moonlight, the jungle cut open by the glowing red eyes of the scout drones. 2 of them hovered just above on the tree line, disc-shaped and bristling with antennae and plasma charges. A third, bulkier one was on the ground, its crab-like legs twitching as it scanned the area. Silvia moved with terrifying speed, her claws slashed across the ground drone sensors, blinding it before it could react. It screeched and jerked sideways, spraying a burst of static into the air. She rolled beneath the returning plasma burst from one of the flying scouts, snarling as a beam scorched the edge of her shoulder. The pain only made her faster. Jack didn't waste time. He charged the grounded bot and plunged the bone blade into a joint in its exoshell. Sparks flew, then oil, and the machine collapsed in on itself with a shriek. "2 down!" Silvia panted, sliding beside him, blood seeping from her wound. Last one signaling. Jack looked up. The remaining drone was climbing, red light blinking furiously. "They know you're here now," he muttered. "They'll come for me," Silvia said, gripping her arm, "and for you." Jack didn't ask why she wasn't surprised he jumped in. There wasn't time for that. And frankly, he didn't want to admit how natural it had felt. Fighting beside her, moving like a unit, it reminded him of how things used to be, back when his missions meant something more than profit. He grabbed her by the waist and helped her back toward the tent, ignoring her hissing protests about the wound. "Let me clean that," he said once they were inside. She swatted his hand away, then stopped herself. "I'll do it." She sat, ripping a jar from the shelf, pouring a thick salve over her claws and running them across the burned fur with a hiss. Her eyes watered, but her expression stayed flat. Jack crouched beside her, watching closely. "That drone saw your markings," he said quietly. "They know you're a healer." "They've known for weeks. They just hadn't found me yet." "Then why risk everything by helping me?" Silvia didn't speak at first. She took a slow breath, bandaged her shoulder, and looked over at him without the usual guard in her gaze. "Because I was tired of only saving people who looked like me." Jack leaned back on his hands, absorbing that. It wasn't just a choice. It was rebellion. You realize what that means. They'll hunt you harder now. "I've been hunted before," she said, "but not with someone beside me." There was no flirtation in her tone, no coyness, just truth. Jack swallowed that truth like dry stone. He didn't know how to answer it, not directly, so he just reached over, grabbed the nearest flask of water, and offered it to her. She took it, their hands brushing, and the heat between them suddenly pulsed again, quiet but undeniable. "We'll need to move," she said eventually. "They'll send more bigger ones." "Where?" "Deep into the jungle. There's a hidden outpost. Narmary rebels hold it. They'll listen to me, and they'll want to hear what you know." Jack hesitated. "I'm not with them, Silvia. I didn't sign up to fight in your war." She didn't flinch. "Then make it your war now." And for the first time, Jack wasn't sure he could say no. Not when her voice shook just slightly when she said "we." Not when the memory of her claws tearing into metal and her body shielding has still lingered so vividly. Not when everything he'd believed about the mission was already broken. Outside, the jungle trembled again, not with machines this time, but with life returning. But inside the tent, the air between them no longer felt clinical or detached. It felt charged, uncertain, and ready to change. They traveled under the thick veil of the jungle canopy. Each footstep a careful decision through moss-draped roots and winding stone paths carved by nature and Narmary both. Silvia led with a steady, silent grace, despite the wound at her shoulder. She hadn't said much since the fight, only nodding to indicate direction or pausing to scan the terrain for signs of drones. Jack followed close behind, his legs sore but functional now, reinforced by a brace Silvia had fastened with fibers tougher than any synthetic he'd ever worn. He could walk, he could fight, but more than that, he could feel every step tying him further into something he hadn't meant to be part of, yet didn't want to escape. The deeper they went, the more the jungle changed. Trees bent inward like sentinels guarding sacred ground, their leaves glowing faintly from within. The air thickened with the scent of iron-rich soil and the subtle perfume of blooming machanid flowers. At one point, Silvia paused beside a narrow creek that shimmered with silver light, knelt, and pressed her clawed fingers to the water's surface in a gesture that was clearly ritualistic. Jack stayed quiet, watching. Her eyes were closed, her lips moved soundlessly. It wasn't a prayer. It was something older, more instinctual. When she rose again, she didn't explain, and he didn't ask. By nightfall, they reached a high ridge where the treetops dropped into mist and jagged stone. Below, half shrouded in fog, Jack spotted the faint outline of a structure, low, broad, and half blended into the environment. Silvia motioned to crouch. They waited, silently watching for patrols or sensor flashes. Only when the wind shifted and brought the scent of smoked meat and iron did she nod. They descended in silence, sliding between crags and vines until they reached the stone arch that marked the rebel perimeter. A figure emerged from the mist, rifle-raised armor cobbled from scavenged drone plates and tribal bone. His fur was shorter, gray-streaked, with blue eyes sharp and hostile. Silvia the guard growled, "You were warned." "I wasn't followed," she said, lifting her hand slightly. "This is Jack. He's not with Tarotek anymore." The guard's eyes narrowed at Jack. "You bring a human into sacred soil and expect us to believe. He fought beside me," Silvia interrupted, voice like steel, "saved my life, twice, and he knows where they're building the main extractor." That changed the tension. The guard lowered his rifle a few inches. "The extractor, you're sure?" "I saw the site," Jack said. "Did recon before my ship got shot out of the sky? I've got coordinates, infrastructure specs, I can help." The guard didn't reply immediately. Then he stepped aside, motioning toward the stone path that spiraled into the foggy camp. "He walks behind you, no weapons drawn. We'll hear him out." Inside the outpost, the world changed again. The place was more than a camp. It was a sanctuary hidden in a war zone. Biolamps lit the walkways, casting soft hues across banners woven from Namari hair and cloth. Children darted between tents made of bark and metal. Warriors sat sharpening bone-edged axes, while older beasts sang in low, deep tones near fires. Jack didn't miss the way they all looked at him, some with suspicion, others with curiosity. No one welcomed him, no one needed to. Silvia led him to a central pavilion where a council of elder warriors sat in a wide circle, each one scarred and draped in ceremonial beads that clicked faintly with every movement. At the head of the circle sat Chieftain Varric, massive even by Namari standards, with horns thicker than Silvia's and eyes dulled by time, but not weakness. He did not rise when they approached. You have brought the human," Varric said without inflection. "You risk our legacy." Silvia stepped forward. "I risk nothing. He risked himself first. He's seen the machines. He knows their design. We can use that." Varric stared at Jack. "Do you speak for yourself, or does this female speak for you?" Jack met his gaze without flinching. "I speak for myself. Tarotek lied to me, sent me in blind. I was supposed to extract a sensor package, nothing more. They didn't say a word about poisoning your springs or killing your people. When they sent drones after Silvia just for helping me, I saw the truth. You don't have to like me. Just use what I know." The room was quiet. Some elders whispered, others grunted. One hissed in disapproval, but Varric said nothing for a long time. Then with a small nod, he gestured to a flat piece of crystal embedded in the floor, a map projector. Silvia activated it. Jack knelt beside her and marked the locations he remembered. Energy emitters, droned nests the scaffolded core of the extractor's frame. As he explained the layout, several elders leaned in, eyes sharpening. "They'll be done in a week," Jack concluded. "If you wait any longer, they'll start draining the spring bed." "That's not just damage. It's extinction." A female elder with a jagged scar across her muzzle looked at Varric. "We cannot face their full force." "But we don't have to," Jack said quickly. "Hit the core. The central anchor rig is still vulnerable. Without it, the whole scaffold collapses. You won't need to fight the army, just cripple the structure. Make it too costly to rebuild." Varric looked at Silvia. "You trained to heal. You were told never to cross into war." Silvia didn't lower her gaze. "Healing means protecting. If that means tearing down the thing that poisons us, then I will." The old chief said nothing more. He rose with a slow, heavy breath and walked into the fog, leaving the elders to murmur behind him. Silvia turned to Jack, her expression unreadable. "That could have gone worse," Jack said. "It's not over," she replied, "but they'll consider it now." They were given a tent near the outer rim, large enough for both of them, but with a line of fur, bedding separating the space clearly, until Silvia tossed her satchel down on the mat beside his. Jack watched her carefully as she removed her jewelry and armor, piece by piece, each clink of metal like a quiet countdown. "I meant what I said," she murmured. "You could have run, you didn't." Jack hesitated. "Neither did you. You could have let me die." Silvia knelt beside him, her eyes glowing soft in the dark. "I couldn't. I saw something in you, not just weakness, not just pain, but something alive." He swallowed hard. "And What do you see now?" She leaned in, her breath warm and slow. "A man I no longer see as enemy." Her tongue touched his ribs again, not to heal this time, but to remember, to remind. And when she kissed him, it was without force, without ceremony. Just the honest press of something they both had been denying since the moment she dragged him from the jungle. Outside, the camp stood still. Inside, two enemies became something else entirely. The morning sun barely filtered through the thick canopy above, casting pale streaks across the fur-lined tent where Jack sat, boots on, arms resting across his knees, mind grinding against the weight of everything he now knew. The mission he'd been given, the people he was supposed to report on, the land he was sent to observe, all of it had flipped into something impossible to ignore. Tarotek wasn't here to stabilize. They were here to drain, harvest, and leave behind rot. He had walked into a war zone under the pretense of neutrality, and instead of following orders, he had chosen to protect the very people his employers would call collateral. There was no going back now. Silvia moved quietly, as always, yet Jack still felt her presence before she said a word. She stepped inside, her body framed by the morning haze, armor half-fastened, jewelry clinking softly as she approached. Her shoulder was freshly wrapped, and the way she moved showed she hadn't fully recovered, but she would never admit it. Jack turned toward her, nodding silently as she handed him a small cloth bundle. Inside were dried strips of meat and a hard flatbread that tasted like bark, but filled his stomach all the same. The elders debated all night, she said without ceremony. Some still want to flee, others want to defend the springs. One wants to burn everything and retreat into the mountains. Jack chewed slowly. "And you?" "I want to fight," she said, sitting across from him. "I want to destroy that extractor before it poisons the earth beneath us, but I can't do it alone, and not everyone trusts you yet." He swallowed hard. "I can't blame them. I wouldn't trust me either if I were in their position." "But you're not," she replied sharply. "You're in mine now." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Yours." Silvia didn't look away. "You bonded to this, to me. When I healed you, when you saved me, when we fought side by side, those weren't coincidences. You've been chosen by this path whether you meant to walk it or not." He leaned back slightly, absorbing her words. They carried a gravity that went beyond mere duty. There was a deep pull behind them, something cultural, spiritual maybe. Yet she never said it with mystical weight, just clarity, fact. She wasn't trying to convince him. She was just letting him see the truth for what it was. "I've been thinking about what happens after," Jack said slowly. "If we destroy that extractor, they'll come back with more. Tarotek doesn't lose easily." "They'll come," Silvia agreed. "But if we show them it costs too much to stay, they'll find easier prey. Corporations like theirs don't retreat from morals. They retreat from loss." That made sense in the ugly, pragmatic way war always did. Tarotek wouldn't keep spending credits and bots on a territory that turned into a bleeding wound. They wanted quick profits, not long-term entanglements, but the risk would be massive. Jack had seen their reinforcements firsthand, what they could bring from orbit in under an hour. They'd have one shot to cripple the core and vanish before retaliation swept across the jungle like fire. "So what's the plan?" he asked. "We strike tonight," she said, lowering her voice. "A small unit, no open conflict. We use the map you gave. Target the central column of the extractor scaffold. That's where the stabilizer node sits. Without it, the structure folds into itself." Jack nodded, then frowned. "And the springs, won't they be damaged in the collapse?" "No," Silvia said. "The springs run deep. Their surface veins were sealed centuries ago by our ancestors to prevent corruption. If we collapse the scaffold correctly, the wreckage will fall away from the water source. We'll need precise charges and your eyes to guide us." He was already pulling on his armor before she finished. He didn't need more convincing. Not because of guilt or obligation, because when he looked at her, when he saw the fire behind her calm, the unwavering way she chose her people even when they feared her for it, he saw something worth defending. Not just the land. Her. As dusk fell, Jack stood beside Silvia and a team of 5 rebel warriors, all clad in hybrid armor. Ceremonial fur and scavenged alloy plates melded together in a patchwork that somehow felt more intimidating than sleek corporate tech. They moved through the jungle like ghosts, communicating with subtle hand signs and silent glances. Jack took point with a scanning visor salvaged from a drone, identifying heat signatures, laser grids, and scout patrol paths. The extractor rose from the clearing like a metal parasite, glowing veins pooling through its reinforced spine as it drained power from the earth. Jack felt his stomach twist at the sight. He remembered how many of these he'd helped scout for in the past, never questioning what happened afterward. Seeing it here, nestled like a wound in sacred ground, made his skin crawl. They reached the perimeter, and Silvia whispered to him without looking away from the glow, "We have 12 minutes before drone rotation resets." "That's our window." Jack nodded and moved toward the underside of the scaffold. Silvia followed, laying charges with skilled precision, her claws moving like surgical tools as she fused each explosive to the anchor points he indicated. The others spread out, covering the flanks, watching for aerial threats. Jack could feel his pulse rising, not from fear, but purpose. For the first time in a long time, his mission was clear and clean. They finished with seconds to spare. Jack pressed the activation trigger into Silvia's palm. "Your land. Your choice." She held it, fingers tightening slowly, then gave him a single nod. The blast rocked the ground with a thunder that silenced every creature for miles. Metal shrieked, scaffolds collapsed, and the extractor's core bent inward like a crumbling tower. Fire flared, then died beneath smoldering debris. The team vanished into the trees before the first wave of retaliation could descend, and by the time Tarotek's response drones arrived, the jungle had swallowed them whole. Back at the rebel camp, the mood was tense but electric. Whispers turned into cheers. Suspicion cracked open into respect. Elders nodded. Warriors clapped Jack on the back. For the first time, he wasn't just tolerated. He was one of them. Later that night, Silvia found him by the spring's edge, watching the reflection of moonlight ripple through the water. She said nothing for a long time, just sat beside him and traced a claw through the water's surface. "They'll come back," he said quietly. "I know," she replied, "but they'll think twice now." Silvia leaned her head against his shoulder. "So will I." He looked down at her, warmth coiling tight in his chest. "About what?" She smiled softly. "About keeping you at arm's length." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. He simply took her hand, wrapped his fingers around her clawed ones, and held it there, letting the quiet say everything words couldn't. The war wasn't over, but something between them had just begun. The jungle around the rebel camp breathed with a strange kind of stillness the morning after the strike. It wasn't peace. No one in Silvia's tribe would have called it that, but it was a momentary quiet like the breath drawn before another blow. The extractor was down. The sacred ground was spared. But Tarotek's silence, in response, wasn't reassurance. It was a warning. Jack felt it in the way the wind didn't stir the trees, the way the birds hadn't sung since dawn. He stood near the outer edge of the camp, eyes scanning the thick foliage, every sound sharpening the knot in his gut. He knew retaliation would come. He just didn't know when. Behind him, Silvia approached, her steps light despite the heaviness hanging over them both. Her shoulder was healing well, though she still favored her opposite side slightly when she walked. She wore a fresh wrap of Namari leather and bone along her arms, new scars from the last battle etched into her lavender fur like ribbons of fire. Her eyes were steady, but not cold, as she stopped beside him. "They're gathering above orbit," she said quietly. One of the scouts intercepted a pulse scan. "They're not just sending drones this time, they're sending soldiers." Jack didn't turn to face her, not yet. "How many?" "2 dropships, maybe more after that. They'll come fast and loud. They'll bring pain, not persuasion." He nodded slowly, already replaying logistics in his head. "And the camp." Being emptied, she said. The elders agreed. Too many children here? Too many voices to be silenced if we stay. They'll move to the valley, to the underground tunnels. Jack finally looked at her. You're not going with them. She didn't bother denying it. No, I can't. If I leave now, they'll see it as surrender. They'll come back again and again. Someone has to show them we're not running anymore. Jack folded his arms, thinking hard. Then you're staying to fight. I'm staying, she said carefully, to protect. There was a difference in her voice, an edge of something deeper than duty, more sacred than strategy. Jack saw it in the way her claws flexed and unflexed, in the quiet focus in her gaze. She wasn't trying to be a martyr. She was rooted here, not by obligation, but by belief. This land wasn't just home. It was her. Jack stepped closer, lowering his voice. Then I'm staying too. Silvia blinked once slowly. You don't have to. You've done more than enough. You could still leave, head back to the rim, find a smuggler's port, disappear. I could, Jack said, but I won't. She searched his face for a long time, like she was trying to find some trace of falsehood, some flicker of fear, some excuse to push him away again, but there wasn't any. He was all in, not just for the land or the fight, for her. You know this might be a death sentence, she said. I've had worse, he replied, and it wasn't bravado. Just honesty. Silvia exhaled through her nose and finally nodded. Then we'll make them bleed. The day was spent reinforcing the outer ridge. The warriors who stayed worked without speaking much, focused and determined. Jack helped where he could, laying traps, rigging old drone parts to overload, reinforcing barricades with jagged steel. The camp shrank in numbers as the non-combatants left, escorted by elder scouts who melted into the jungle like mist. By sundown, only a small band remained, warriors who had nothing left to lose or everything still worth protecting. As night fell, the fires were dimmed, voices hushed. Jack sat with Silvia beneath the large root arch near the spring, the same place they had first kissed. She was quiet, her claws resting across her lap, her long tail curled around her legs. Her eyes weren't on the stars, but on the water's soft ripple. Before this ends, she said softly, there's something I need to do. Jack looked over. What? Silvia rose in motion for him to follow. He did, without hesitation. She led him down a narrow path that curved away from the main trail, veiled by vines and old stone. It twisted through the jungle and finally opened into a circular grove surrounded by massive trees with bark the color of aged bone. In the center was a shallow pool, faintly glowing with blue bioluminescence. Carvings surrounded the edge, glyphs in swirling Nomori script that pulsed faintly when Silvia stepped near. This is a bond spring, she said, where healers take vows, where warriors speak truth, where spirits listen. Jack stared at the water, mesmerized by its quiet pulse. What are we doing here? She didn't answer at first. She stepped into the pool, water lapping against her ankles, then turned to him. Her first shimmered under the light, and her voice was quiet, but powerful. I was born for duty, trained to never attach, taught that bonds make you weak, that love dulls the edge of your instincts. But they were wrong. You make me stronger. You see me, not just the healer or the warrior or the beast, just me. She extended her hand. I want to bind with you, Jack, not as part of a protocol, not for healing for us, for whatever comes next. He didn't hesitate. He stepped into the pool, took her hand and pulled her clothes. The water around them rippled, glowing brighter as if the spring itself approved. He didn't need to say anything, his actions already had. He cupped her face, leaned in and kissed her, slow, deep, and honest. Their foreheads rested together as the light rose around them, warmth wrapping through their joined bodies, not just skin but spirit. In that moment, no war touched them, no drones hovered, no orders lingered, only the steady beat of two hearts choosing each other. They stood like that for a long time, until the water stilled and the light faded. Then, hand in hand, they walked back to camp, warriors now bound not by fate, but by choice. And whatever came with the dawn They would face it together. The sky cracked open before sunrise, not with thunder or storm, but with the low, mechanical hum of incoming drop thrusters that vibrated the trees and sent birds scattering in terrified silence. Jack didn't need to look up to know Tarotek had arrived. He was already up, armored, and crouched behind a barricade of sharpened metal spikes reinforced with knammery bone. Across the ridge, Silvia stood tall beside him, her claws flexing rhythmically, eyes locked on the tree line ahead, like she could already see the future spilling into their final stand. She didn't speak, didn't flinch. Her stillness was its own kind of war cry. The remaining defenders moved into position with the quiet purpose of those who understood death might be near, but chose to meet it upright. There were only 16 of them left, warriors too stubborn to flee, too bloodbound to the land to retreat. They weren't out to win a war. They were here to send a message, to show Tarotek the cost of desecration, to let the last memory of their resistance burn into the ground if it had to. Jack slid his rifle into position, a salvaged pulse weapon fused with a knammery charge crystal. It wasn't elegant, but it hit hard. Across from him, one of the younger warriors, barely older than a teenager by human standards, passed him a cartridge of energy cells and gave a small, solemn nod. No bravado, no words, just understanding. Jack took it and returned the gesture. A shrill whistle pierced the air, followed by the thunder of boots. From the clearing below, Tarotek soldiers emerged in formation, black armor gleaming, helmets sealed, rifles raised. Behind them crawled 3 bipedal walkers, each bristling with sensor arrays and rotary cannons. Jack counted at least 30 infantry in the first wave, more than enough to raise the ridge if given the chance. He felt the twinge of fear press against the back of his mind, but it was smothered by the steady presence at his side. Silvia turned to him, her voice low and even. "We hold until the flanks collapse, then we draw them into the center. Bait the walkers into the trap pit," Jack asked, loading the last cell into his rifle. She nodded. "You detonate. I'll cover the east wall." "I don't like splitting up," he muttered, her eyes flicked toward him. "We're not splitting. We're surrounding." The first shots came sharp and fast. Tarotek opened fire without warning, their plasma rounds streaking through the trees like burning spears. The defenders didn't flinch. They returned fire with precision, bolts of glowing blue energy punching through the jungle mist, striking armor and igniting bodies in quick bursts. The ridge turned into chaos. Jack ducked low, firing methodically, targeting the soldiers driving the walkers forward. Silvia was a blur at the eastern flank, tearing through enemy lines with savage grace, her claws slashing deep, her movements honed from ritual and rage alike. Jack moved when the signal came, 3 long horn calls in succession. The flanks had collapsed, retreating back to the center path that wound straight to the heart of the camp. The walkers advanced, their massive feet crunching through stone and brush, cannons spooling to full charge. Jack sprinted across the kill zone, heart pounding, as Silvia's warriors peeled back like flowing water, letting the machines charge through what looked like a broken line. He reached the trigger point just as the lead walker passed over it. Sweat poured down his face. He dropped to one knee, opened the casing on the detonator, and slammed the activator crystal into place. The ridge roared. The explosion tore through the underbrush in a wall of fire and shrapnel. 2 of the walkers buckled and collapsed, their legs shredded, their bodies crumpling into twisted wreckage. The third staggered back, limbs sparking, one arm dangling by cables. Its turrets swiveled toward Jack, who rolled behind a crumbling pillar just as plasma fire turned the stone to ash. Silvia appeared from the smoke, leaping high, her body twisting midair as she landed atop the damaged walker and drove her claws into the exposed cockpit seam. Sparks flew, metal screeched, and with a final burst of light, the walker collapsed beneath her. Jack scrambled to his feet and ran to her side. She was breathing heavily, one arm burned, blood soaking into her fur, but her stance didn't falter. "They're regrouping," she said. "Another wave." He glanced down the hill. Reinforcements were already pushing through the trees, not as many, but enough to finish them if they didn't act fast. "We can't hold this position," he said. "We need to pull back to the spring." She hesitated, then nodded. Fall back, collapse the ridge. They ran, shouting the order as they went. The defenders fell into retreat formation, covering each other as they moved. Jack reached the ridge's final anchor stone, a massive slab rigged with crystal charges. He slammed his fist into the trigger glyph and felt the earth shudder beneath his boots. The ridge crumbled in their wake, rocks tumbling into the ravine below, sealing the path behind them. At the spring, the defenders regrouped, half their number gone, but none broken. Silvia leaned against a pillar, her body shaking from exhaustion, yet her eyes still alive with fire. Jack wrapped an arm around her waist and helped her down beside the pool, the water glowing faintly around them. "We bought time," she said, her voice ragged. "That's all we ever needed." Jack crouched beside her, brushing dirt and blood from her cheek. "We gave them a scar." She looked at him, eyes softening. "You stayed." "Always." She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again, the edge of a smile tugging at her lips despite the pain. "Then we win, no matter what comes next." And though gunfire still echoed faintly in the distance, though the smoke of war hung thick in the air, Jack knew she was right. Because in this place with her, he'd found something worth more than orders or contracts. He found the fight that finally meant something. The spring was no longer just sacred ground. It had become the last line between survival and annihilation. As the defenders tended their wounds and reinforced the perimeter, the air grew thicker with smoke and tension. The jungle, once a chaotic cradle of noise, was now too still. Even the wind seemed hesitant to stir. Jack stood at the far edge of the stone barrier, overlooking the path they'd destroyed, eyes searching the horizon for movement. He knew Tarotek wouldn't give up, not after the damage they'd sustained. They would regroup, recalculate, and come back smarter. That wasn't fear talking. That was experience. Behind him, Silvia sat beside the water's edge, her injuries bound tight in woven, herb-soaked wraps, her claws stained with blood, some of it her own, most not. She hadn't spoken much since they pulled back. It wasn't grief. It was the kind of silence that came when a warrior was still too much in the moment to reflect. Jack knew better than to disturb her. He could feel the pressure building in the air, the unspoken truth, one more push, one final wave, and this place would either be lost or locked away from Tarotek forever. Chieftain Varrock emerged from the jungle trails shortly after midday, flanked by 3 surviving elders and the last of the outer scouts. His eyes met Silvia's before drifting to Jack. The 2 men had only exchanged a handful of words since Jack's arrival, but now, standing in the ruins of their last stand, the old warrior addressed him directly. "You stayed." Jack nodded. "I meant to." "You fight like one of us." "I fight for her." Varrock didn't argue. He just nodded once and gestured for Silvia to rise. She did, albeit slower than usual, favoring her burned side. "We need to end this," he said. "Not just hold them off, finish it. Root them out." Silvia's eyes sharpened. The uplink. Varrock nodded. The source of their coordination, their relay tower. It controls the drone clusters, the reinforcement beacons, and the long-range scans. Without it, they're blind, lost, cut off from orbit. Jack straightened. "You know where it is?" Varrock motioned to the scouts, who unrolled a scroll and pressed it flat against a rock. The map was etched with burning ink, territory lines, elevation points, known Tarotek positions. A red glyph pulsed at the top of a stone ridge wrapped in fog, deep within forbidden ground. Silvia inhaled sharply. "That's within the death basin." "The basin is cursed," one elder muttered. "Machines fail, voices vanish, the air is wrong." Jack leaned over the map. "That's why they put it there. No Nomari would step foot on it." Silvia didn't hesitate. "Then that's exactly where I'll go." Jack looked at her, knowing without asking that she wouldn't consider leaving him behind. She was already wounded, already pushing herself beyond the threshold most soldiers would endure. But this wasn't about strength anymore. It was about resolve. "I'm going with you," he said. Varrock didn't argue. He looked at them both with something like weary admiration. "Strike hard. Sever the eye. When they can no longer see, the rest will die blind. They left at nightfall, taking only what they could carry: stealth packs, energy blades, and enough explosives to bring down a tower. The path was slow and unforgiving. The jungle grew stranger the deeper they traveled, colors bleeding at the edges of vision, sounds echoing in ways that didn't follow logic. Jack had been through a dozen alien worlds, but none had unsettled him like this one. Something was off, too silent, too watchful, like the land itself wanted them gone. Silvia moved ahead of him, her posture tense but composed, her eyes flicking to every shadow. The basin loomed ahead like a crater carved by some ancient claw, its rim jagged, its interior shrouded in dense purple mist. They entered without hesitation. Machines lay scattered across the basin floor, Tarotek scouts, Nomori relics, even an old drop craft split in half like a cracked egg. Whatever haunted this place, it didn't discriminate. Silvia kept her breathing steady, guiding Jack through the twisted debris. The tower rose at the center, tall and skeletal, bristling with comms dishes and pulsing with artificial light. Jack checked his scanner. No signals, no movement, but that didn't comfort him. This kind of quiet was never natural. They reached the tower's base and began setting the charges. Jack worked methodically, looping det cord and priming the blast nodes. Silvia kept watch, her claws twitching at every unnatural sound. She didn't trust the silence, and neither did he. Halfway through the sequence, the tower spoke. Not in words, in pulses, a vibration through the air that made Jack's bones feel like they were humming. Lights flared across the ground in strange patterns, not warning systems. Something older, buried in the alien tech Tarotek had built over. Silvia stepped back, eyes wide. The glyphs on her jewelry lit up in tandem. "It's speaking to me," she whispered. Jack stood. "What is it saying?" She didn't answer at first. Then, slowly, "It's asking if I will finish what was started." The pulses grew faster. The ground began to shake. Jack grabbed her arm. "Silvia, we have to go now." She turned to him, face tight with pain and clarity. "It's not just a relay. It's a beacon buried tech from before your people ever came here. Tarotek tapped into it without understanding. It's trying to awaken something. Then we can't let it," Jack said. "Detonate it now." She stared at him for a moment longer, then nodded, and together they slammed the detonator crystal into the ground. A high-pitched tone screamed through the basin. The tower erupted in a pillar of fire, metal and stone launching into the air as the structure imploded inward, crushing itself in a storm of smoke and light. Jack grabbed Silvia and ran, half carrying her as the shockwave tore across the ridge, flattening everything in its path. They didn't stop until they were out of the basin, lungs burning, skin raw from the heat. Behind them, the mist was gone. The light had died. Whatever Tarotek had tried to control was gone. And the uplink with it. They collapsed together under the wide roots of a jungle tree, both gasping, limbs tangled, hearts hammering. Jack looked over at her, eyes wild, adrenaline still racing. "You okay?" She coughed once, then nodded. "Better now." He touched her cheek, then leaned in and kissed her, fierce and full, a declaration forged in smoke and fire, and when they finally pulled apart, the look in her eyes said it all. They had survived the worst. Now all that remained was to return and see if their world still stood. They returned to the camp just before dawn, their clothes torn and skin scraped raw, every step a push through exhaustion. Smoke still drifted in lazy spirals from the ridge where the last fight had taken place, and the scent of ash mixed with the lingering aroma of herbs clinging to the earth. The moment Silvia and Jack emerged from the tree line, the few remaining warriors turned their heads, eyes wide, jaws slack, unable to hide the disbelief. Most hadn't expected them to come back at all. Those who had didn't expect them to return whole, and yet there they were, worn down but standing, alive and steady, bonded more deeply than when they left. Silvia didn't pause to soak in the attention. She walked straight to the chieftain's fire where Varric waited in silent vigil, his horns freshly wrapped in the red cords of mourning. A few of their kin had fallen in the night's ambush. The elders had already begun carving memorial sigils into the stones that circled the sacred spring. The loss weighed on the camp like a heavy mist, but as Silvia knelt before the fire, that weight shifted. She reached into her belt, pulled free the scorched shard of the Tarotek uplink beacon, and placed it in the center of the ashes. "Gone," she said. Varric looked down at the twisted hunk of metal, then slowly up to her face. He didn't speak right away, but the slight nod he gave her, slow and full of unspoken respect, carried more than words ever could. One by one, the warriors began to gather, silent and reverent. Jack stood behind Silvia, his hands resting at his sides, watching her claim her place not just as a healer or warrior, but as something more. She had led them through fire, and now they looked to her like they used to look at Varric. "She has broken the chain that guided our enemies," the chieftain said at last. "Their sight is severed. Their power now ends where our land begins." There was no cheering, no grand declaration, just quiet understanding, the kind that ran deeper than celebration. It was over, not in the way battles end with parades and medals, but in the way storms fade and leave behind the quiet ache of survival. Later, as the morning light filtered through the canopy, Jack sat alone near the spring, rolling the uplink shard between his fingers. It hummed faintly, a remnant of its former energy, a ghost of the control, at once held over the battlefield. He kept expecting to feel satisfaction, some victorious swell of pride, but what he felt instead was a strange kind of calm. It was the first time in years that he wasn't waiting for the next contract, the next extraction, the next lie. For once, the fight had ended with something that actually mattered. Silvia found him there, her presence silent until her shadow joined his across the water. She sat beside him without a word, her eyes softer now, the fire within them dim not from defeat but from peace. "You never asked what comes next," she said quietly. Jack looked at her, brow furrowed. "I figured I'd find out with you." Her smile was slow, real. "The tribe will move deeper into the jungle, build new sanctuaries. They can't stay here, not after everything. The land remembers blood and the spirits need time to heal." "And you?" he asked. She didn't look away. "I go where they go, but not as a healer they want me to lead." Jack leaned back slightly. "I'm not sure I want it," she admitted. "But they've seen me fight. They've seen me bleed. They've seen me break the old codes and still walk upright. That means something?" "It does," Jack said. "You're more than just their protector now." Silvia turned her head slowly, eyes scanning his face. "And you, where does a human mercenary go when the war ends?" He thought about that longer than expected. "I don't know. Maybe I stop being a mercenary." She raised an eyebrow, just like that. Jack exhaled through his nose, gaze drifting to the water. "Not just like that, it's not a clean line. I've spent years being a tool for someone else's agenda. Now, for the first time, I feel like I made a choice that wasn't about money or survival. It was about you, about this place. That matters." She reached over and touched his hand, claws brushing over the back of his knuckles with surprising tenderness. Then, "Stay." Jack looked at her, startled by the directness. "You sure your people will accept that?" "They already have," she said. "They saw what you did. You fought for us when you could have fled. You stood your ground beside me. That means more than bloodlines ever did." He laughed quietly, rubbing a hand over his face. "So what? I stay here, become part of a tribe that still doesn't speak my language. Spend the rest of my life chasing jaguar-sized lizards out of vegetable fields." She tilted her head, amused. "We don't plant vegetables. We forage." Even worse, she leaned in, her lips grazing his ear. "You wouldn't last a week without me." He grinned. "No, probably not." They stayed like that for a long time, the jungle pools and gently around them, the spring's water reflecting the sky above. Jack felt the tension that had once been his constant companion slip away piece by piece. He had come here as an outsider, a hired gun dropped into a conflict he never intended to touch. And somehow, against every odd, he had found purpose. He had found her. When night fell again, the camp prepared for departure. Packs were loaded, maps traced with glowing ink, and songs sung low to honor the dead. Silvia stood at the front of the caravan, her new robes a blend of warrior and healer, red and white cloth braided around her waist. Jack walked beside her, no longer out of place, no longer unsure. And as they left the ruined ridge behind, stepping into a future not yet written, Jack knew the war had done more than reshape the land. It had rebuilt something inside him he thought long lost, hope and love, not the easy kind, but the kind forged in fire and tested in silence, the kind that asked for nothing but gave everything. With every step they took into the unknown, Jack held her hand a little tighter, and Silvia didn't let go. The jungle had changed. It no longer loomed with danger around every bend, but pulsed with steady rhythm, alive with sound and scent, not as a threat but as a part of daily life. A month had passed since the fall of the uplink tower and the retreat of Tarotek's forces. Word spread fast through the back channels of the galaxy that the Namari resistance had not only held ground, but crippled the corporate foothold on Vitari 9. Without the uplink to guide their reinforcements and with mounting losses, Tarotek cut their losses, pulled out, and redirected their efforts elsewhere. Their satellites went dark, their scout ships disappeared from the horizon. They didn't sign a treaty, they didn't offer reparations. They simply stopped. For Jack, life became something simpler. No missions, no briefings, no contracts with hidden clauses. He woke with the sun bleeding through leaf-filtered light and slept to the chorus of chirping creatures and the soft hush of Silvia's breathing beside him. The tribe had settled deeper into the valley, in a region the machines never touched. The new village had no walls, only flowing paths, tents grown from living roots, and platforms suspended among the trees. Silvia led with quiet confidence, never commanding with force, only by example. Jack had seen her negotiate disputes, lead scouts into new territories, deliver kits with her steady hands, and tend to both warriors and children with the same calm grace. He was never expected to be more than what he already was, her partner, her equal, her choice. He had his place too. He helped hunt reinforced paths with salvaged metal plates, taught some of the older warriors how to disable standard Tarotek drones without wasting energy blasts. The children swarmed him constantly, fascinated by his stories of off-world things and his stubborn refusal to learn Namari fluently, though he picked up more every day, especially with Silvia correcting him under her breath, always with a smirk. He hadn't realized how much he'd needed peace until he finally had it. One evening, as the sky turned a soft violet and the glow mosses along the trail began to light, Jack stood by the edge of the spring that had once been a battleground. The water still shimmered, but now it pulsed with calm instead of tension. He tossed a small stone in, watching the ripples break the surface. He felt her before he saw her. "You still watching the water like it'll tell you something?" Silvia's voice came from behind him, warm and teasing. "Trying to see if it'll say I belong here yet," Jack said, turning toward her. "You wouldn't be allowed to stay if you didn't." "I figured you were just keeping me around for the entertainment," he said, smirking. Silvia stepped up beside him, slipping her hand into his without ceremony. "It's partly that." They stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the grove. Jack broke it first, his voice quieter now. "I've been thinking. I've lived my whole life by getting in and out. No attachments, no roots. Every time I felt something pulling me in too close, I ran." Silvia didn't interrupt. Her eyes stayed on him, steady. "But I didn't run from you. I didn't want to." "You didn't," she said simply. "I want to stay, Silvia. Not just until the next threat, not just until the next shift in power. I want to be here with you for whatever this becomes." She looked at him then, and there was no hesitation, no guarded pause, only a deep stillness that came from absolute certainty. "And then you already are," she said. "You were the moment you let me choose you back." He leaned in and kissed her, slow and full, not rushed or desperate, just right. It was the kind of kiss that didn't ask for more, because it already had everything. She kissed him back with equal weight, her hands sliding up to rest on the sides of his face, her claws never threatening, only holding. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "No more running?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not unless you're coming with me, then you'll never run again." Later that night, the village gathered for the first full moon celebration since the end of the war. Songs were sung in deep harmonies, drums echoed through the forest, and glowing silk creatures floated through the trees like lanterns. Jack sat with Silvia beneath a high arch of woven vines, their backs resting against a shared thing into his hand, a small carved talisman made from stone and dried vine, who longer looked at him as an outsider. He had become a part of the rhythm, a note in the song. Some still called him by a Namari word that loosely translated to stray, but now it was spoken with affection, not suspicion. As the night wore on, Silvia turned to him and pressed something into his hand, a small carved talisman made from stone and dried vine etched with her clan's mark, and a newer symbol for union. He looked at her, eyebrows raised. "It's yours now," she said. "You've earned it." He closed his fingers around it and nodded. "I'll wear it every day." "You better," she said. "You're bonded to us, now to me." She leaned against his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. The fire crackled in the center of the gathering. The stars overhead watched in silence. Jack had gone to Vitari 9 as a man with nothing but a job and an exit plan. Now, he had no destination beyond the arms of the beastwoman who'd once pinned him down and called it healing. No mission beyond protecting the land that had saved him. No fear of tomorrow, because for once, he wanted it. The war was over. He had love. He had purpose. And for the first time in his life, he was home.